Hi and welcome to a Leakfinder that we're going to be doing today on behalf of one of the CardRunners members. I'm Richard Steele. We're going to be looking at around about 50 minutes worth of footage. Before we do that though, what I want to do first of all is just recap on some of the major themes that we looked at in my beginner's guide to pot limit Omaha, which I recently produced for CardRunners, just to give the hands that we're going to review some context and a little bit of narrative. The action that we're going to be looking at is at a 2 4-cent game. So we're going to be looking at the information that I produced in my beginner series in that context. Then we're going to review the hands, and then we're going to do a little summary of what we think we've learned from the video afterwards. Okay, so position is the number one consideration in pot limit Omaha. When I'm looking to play a hand, even before the cards have been dealt, I've got a good idea of what I want to do in the hand based on my position, then my opponent's tendencies. So an obvious example of this is if I'm on the button and there are two really tight players in the blinds, then I'm hoping it gets folded round to me, and I'm opening up pretty much my entire range in that situation, and the cards are pretty much irrelevant. Next, I'm looking at how playable the hand is. Is this a hand I'd rather play heads up, or is it a hand that I'd rather play multi-way? And then what are the other players at the table like? I might have decided that I have a suited ace or some raggy queens, and that there may be some value in a multi-way pot. But if all the players are really tight, then it's not going to get to a multi-way hand, and a limp is just probably going to end up in me getting raised and having to play a hand heads up and out of position. So in certain situations, hand strength is the third most important factor after our position and the other players at the table. So when we put all these factors together, it should inform us whether to fold, call or raise in a particular situation. So as I mentioned, today's action will be at 2 4 cents. So how will that affect the decisions on what hands we're going to play? Well, first of all, at these stakes you can expect games to be loose passive, and if they're not, then you should really look and try and find a new table. The player pool at these stakes is they're just pretty bad. There's very few regular players, because regular players tend to the decent ones tend to move through these stakes pretty quickly. So that's just full of recreational players. If you're sitting at a tight table, then you're really just throwing money away, because you should be able to find a loose passive table very, very easily. So obviously that's something to bear in mind. But in these kind of situations at these loose passive tables, we ideally want to be playing hands that contain a lot of Broadway cards, suited aces, encourage the multi-way action where we can hope to scoop some big 3 or 4 way pots. In addition, while I emphasize the importance of position, in loose passive games you can play around a little bit more with position and playing certain hands out of position, again depending on player tendencies. You can both play hands in early position that you might not normally consider playing, as it's less likely you'll get isolated out of position. What you'll tend to find is if you limp in early position, then you might get limp, limp, limp. Then you might get a raise, and then you'll get a call, call, call. So you might still be able to play a hand in early position that you wouldn't a more aggressive game, because you're just going to get isolated out of position, and we're going to have a good idea of how many players are going to get involved in the hand just by looking at the player tendencies from our stats. And the overarching factor to consider is how well a hand plays multi-way at these kind of stakes. So a hand like 6, 7, 8, 9 double suited has far less value in these games, as in a multi-way pot it's far more likely that someone will have our flush draws covered, and they may actually have the better end of a straight in that situation as well. So that's something to bear in mind. You know, a hand like 6, 7, 8, 9 is considered to be a really premium hand in pot limit Omaha, but not at these stakes, because it's kind of a trouble hand that we can find the pot starts to get out of control, and we don't know if our draws are any good when we're in a multi-way situation. So that's just something to bear in mind. And Finally, what we should consider when making our post-flop decisions are things like stack size, the stack to pot ratio, numbers of opponents, our ranges, our opponents' ranges, and of course our equity in these various situations as well. But I'm going to discuss these various factors as we work through the action.